Thank you, Madam President. Would I be in order for a point of personal privilege?
You're in order, Senator Hogg.
Well, thank you, Madam President. We're still waiting. We're still waiting for answers. We've talked about this. I won't be long here on this. How many cases of child abuse, elder abuse, and sexual abuse were there? What constitutes a lot? What did he do about it? Are we going to apologize to the whistleblower who was fired for blowing the whistle on sexual harassment and then was put on the state's do not hire list? We're still waiting. Are we going to reopen the investigation at the Iowa Veterans Home? We're still waiting for the apology to the workers and their lawyers who just 8 days ago the governor said were lying. Now, I know some of you don't like us talking about this. Trust me, it's not my favorite thing to do either. There are lots of other things I'd rather be doing. I'd rather be wrapping up this session and passing good legislation like the social host bill we did last week, or fighting climate change, or there's a whole lot of things we could be doing. But this is our job to provide oversight. When the new sheriff does things wrong, doesn't tell the truth, isn't wearing clothes, somebody has to speak up and point that out. Now, I want to talk about yesterday's Government Oversight Committee meeting because there were a lot of you who were not able to be there. Government Oversight's got a lot of work cut out for us. It's going to be a long, hot summer. Tracking down all these rat holes. Instead of having full disclosure from the governor's office, we get more dodging and denial and distractions. It's time-consuming, tedious, but necessary work. Yesterday, the Oversight Committee had before them Paul Carlson, the Chief Resource Maximization Officer, and Doug Woodley, the General Service Enterprises Chief Operating Officer. Woodley, you will recall, is the person who Dean Ibsen testified was the supervisor who told him he had to take another job if he wanted to keep his job. And it was also Ibsen who testified that it was Woodley who helped lots of friends of Woodley get work through the Department of Administrative Services. Now, they were supposed to appear last Wednesday, but they apparently had a scheduling conflict, so they got 5 additional days to prepare. They also testified yesterday, this was interesting, that they got additional preparation help from Matt Hinch, Brenna Finley, and Jimmy Centers in the governor's office. And after the additional 5 days, and after the preparation work, what did they tell us? Well, one of the key moments in the unfolding hush money scandal is the moment when the Department of Administrative Services decided to terminate the 6 engineers who worked for DAS and replace them with 3 people who were hired without the jobs being posted, without a search, without advertisement, hired as bureau chiefs who had no bureau, at a higher pay level than the 6 engineers who were terminated. And by not my notes, those 3 replacements were Brant Carr, Calvin Miller, and Evan Hagen. Mr. Woodley testified that he was the person responsible for hiring these 3 people in summer of 2011 when DAS was planning to implement the reorganization. He acknowledged that the jobs weren't posted or advertised. He acknowledged there was no application process. Okay, go back to Thursday, April 3rd. Mike Carroll, that's when he denied there was any pay for silence. Remember that? So that's almost 2 weeks ago. Carroll testified that he was not personally involved in hiring the replacements at all, and Woodley acknowledged that he was the person who made that decision. He testified on April 3rd that he personally knew Brant Carr, but not the other 2, and unfortunately the committee didn't have the chance to ask Woodley, how did you know Brant Carr? Because that's unfortunately one of the things we need to know. What was that prior relationship? Were they friends? Did they work together? Cronyism. Unfortunately, this is about cronyism, so we need to know these facts. Well, how did Woodley select the other 2 employees who were being hired to replace the entire engineering department and who would be taking over the management of what Woodley said was more than $400 million in construction projects? Well, what did Woodley say yesterday? Those of you who were there will remember it. He said, I talked to, quote, people in the industry, and when pressed to name who those people in the industry were, what did he say? I don't recall. Except he could remember one name, Ryan Lamb, the governor's designated fall guy. I wonder if Matt Hinch, Brenna Findley, and Jimmy Centers talked in the preparation session with them about their willingness to have them name Ryan Lamb. He couldn't remember who he talked to for these critically important positions? Really? So we're going to have to track that down. It gets worse, Madam President. If I heard correctly, and the acoustics were terrible. If I heard correctly, I believe Woodley also testified that it was these 3 employees, Brant Carr, Calvin Miller, and Evan Hagen, who were replacing this entire department, managing the construction contracts. They were also the people, without supervision from Woodley and without supervision from Carroll, were the people who determined who to hire for the construction management companies. Who were these private contractors who were replacing the entire department? According to Legislative Services Agency, these construction management companies were paid nearly $1.4 million in FY12. That's a lot of money. And it's a lot more money than the state used to pay to Dean Ibsen and Carol Frank and Tony Schmitz and Ken Thornton and the others who were fired by the Department of Administrative Services. So who were these companies that got $1.4 million? And more importantly, how did they know Brant Carr, Calvin Miller, and Evan Hagen? What was the process that Brant Carr, Calvin Miller, and Evan Hagen used to hire these companies? Final thing, Madam President, here's why this is important. In the early 19th century, the United States had a patronage system, also known as the spoils system, for hiring people. And beginning in the late 19th century, this country made the decision, you know what, we shouldn't have that. We should have people hired based on merit in an open, fair process, untainted by political influence and cronyism. 1871, the Civil Service Reform League was created. 1883, Congress acted to pass the Pendleton Act. The idea was that government jobs would be based on merit or objective qualifications, not on personal favoritism or political reward. And now our laws go even further and say we cannot discriminate on the basis of age, race, gender, sexual orientation. We don't live in an age where it's appropriate to hire people in state government because they are part of a good old white boys network of personal friends and political supporters. And so, Madam President, we need answers to these questions. Remember, the Department of Administrative Services is just one agency. We got another 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 agencies that had hush money. What were they trying to shut the employees up about? It's going to be a long, hot summer, but we need to do our work. Thank you, Madam President.